whispers in the night, voices filling up your mind. You're like a ghost of you. You've been drowning in the rain, slowly saving up the pain. So deep inside of you, see the colors of the sky slowly turn from black and white. In your eyes, oh, I can see the fire in your eyes.
Hello and welcome to episode 26 of Shankism, the Renaissance. Alrighty, let's get right into it. So we're talking about the Renaissance, which is going to be known as the rebirth. Some of the things you'll be seeing in this episode. Sistine Chapel, I'll talk about that. Talk about, Adam and God, Michelangelo painting this on top of the Sistine Chapel. Mona Lisa, I'm sure you recognize her. Leonardo da Vinci painting that. We'll talk about that. So what does the Renaissance mean? As I said, it means the rebirth. Now, this is a rebirth in culture, a rebirth in logic and science and facts and research and education. They had gone through that incredible dark period, and now they are coming out of it. This is after the Crusades. This is relatively after the Black Death, and they're looking at Greek and Roman history, Greek and Roman achievements, and saying, wow, what they did was awesome. We need to get back to that. And so you have this love and appreciation for the Greco-Roman culture, the Greco-Roman style. I mean, keep in mind, the epicenter of this is in Italy. And this is where Rome was based out of. So they're looking at all these monuments and sculptures and ancient ruins, and they're like, why can't we do that? Let's study this. And this is what the rebirth is. So how did the Crusades stimulate trade between Europe and the Muslim Empire? Now, they were already kind of trading before this, but once those Crusaders went to the Middle East, it stimulated trade by introducing Europeans to many desirable products. So they started getting, different spices and different clothing and different products in general, and that really catapulted their desire to trade with this other world that was out there. So there's a lot of interactions. Europe becomes more global than they ever had before, because during the Dark Ages, they were just secluded by themselves. Now, in this late Middle Age period and into the Renaissance, they are, hey, where can we go? Who can we look into and grab their achievements and use their achievements to benefit our own continent or country? Because now this nation's set up. So again, this is kind of recapping with the Crusades and so forth. So a lot of products are being shipped between these two worlds. Effects of the Crusades, and I know I'm going over this, we already went over this before, but this does play a major portion of why the Renaissance just takes off. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. There's a reason, a purpose behind it. So increased demand for Middle Eastern products. So they're getting more interactions with other cultures. And the Muslims were great at the achievements that they had. That they were building architecturally, they were advancing in science and math and writing and history and medicine and all these things, and the Europeans are just playing catch up at that point. The Crusades will stimulate production of goods and trade in the Middle East markets. So they're still, even though that they have conflicts of religion, they're still going to continue to trade. They'll encourage the use of credit and banking. So the credit system becomes a huge, huge thing. Banking becomes, this is when banking starts. This is when actual banks become relevant, because if you were a crusader in Italy, you'd remember you didn't want to take all of your money with you. You wanted to have a letter of credit, basically like a note saying that I have this much money in my bank in Venice, Italy. Now I'm in Jerusalem, and I need to get that same money out. It's like having multiple locations of the same bank, like a PNC bank in California. You can take your money out just as you would here in Virginia. So the Italian city-states of the Renaissance. You do want to write down that the Renaissance has what's known as Italian city-states. So if you didn't already guess it, this is where the epicenter, meaning the focal point of the entire lesson is, this episode. City-states, we studied them with the Sumerians, we studied them with the Greeks, we studied them with the Mayans. Well, now we have them again with Italians. All right, those are the bulk of the ones that we studied. Places like Milan, Genoa, Venice are major city-states. Florence will be the biggest one of all. Rome is, sure, but it's not nearly what the other ones will be, because if you see where Venice and Genoa are, those are right on the seas, the Mediterranean Sea, the Tyrrhenian Sea, the Adriatic Sea, meaning they're going to be prime for shipping goods in and out. You do want to write this down. So at the center of the banking family is the Medici family. And it's a whole banking family. They become incredibly rich and powerful. They become so rich they start involving themselves into politics and running whole city-states that are down here. Specifically, Florence is the big one. The main Medici, Cosimo Medici. You want to put down he's the first of the Medici political family. So he kind of starts to say, hey, we're super rich, and we're going to get ourselves involved into politics, meaning we're going to start running whole countries. But not only that, they were great patrons. And what a patron is somebody that supports typically the arts. Because if you're an artist, if people aren't buying your paintings, you're not making any money. And you can't just be drawing willy-nilly. So he said, hey, I will pay you yearly or monthly, draw, do whatever you want. I just want to see beautiful things in my world. You know, I'm so rich. Like, they have, obviously, patrons typically have disposable income, meaning they have extra money. Cosimo Medici was one of them, from 1389 to 1464. Important economic concepts. So the church rule against usury, which we've talked about. Banks' practice of charging interest helped to secularize northern Italy. So banks became separate then from the church, okay, in northern Italy specifically. New accounting and bookkeeping practices using the Arabic numerals, because it was much simpler to keep track of the numbers in these banks if you have Arabic numerals. That's why Arabic caught on so greatly. The three things here you want to make sure you know and write down. The first one is humanism. I'm guessing you're going to understand what this is. It's an intellectual movement that focused on human potential and achievements. So not what God can do for us, or what humans can do on their own, unassisted. No higher power really focusing. It's let's focus on what humans can do, whether it be architecturally, sculpturing, or art in general. The second one here is classicism. This is the return to the ideals of Greece and Rome. Okay, returning to the glory days of these two main cultures. Greco-Roman. 3. Secularism. Focus on non-religious and worldly pleasures. So they're looking at not everything, most of the art much of the art is not really focused on religion. They're not always drawing pictures of Jesus. They're not always drawing pictures of God or saints and things like that. Sure, they will be in there, but a lot of what they'll do is they'll incorporate Greco-Roman figures, and then meaning people, and then they'll also incorporate artists of the day, or Renaissance men as they were known as. One of the first people, and there will be lots of people that we have to talk about, so you got to make sure that you understand these individuals and just classify what they're known for doing. The first one here is Francisco Petrarch. Now, with Petrarch is considered the father of humanism. Thinking you know what father means, okay? It means like he started it, basically. Like this ideas of what can humans do on their own? What can we write? What can we think of? What can we create? He wrote in the prose and poetry about classical virtues, unrequited love for a woman called Laura. He wrote in both Italian and Latin. So he wrote in his vernacular, and he wrote in Latin. Supposedly he died with his pen in his hand. Now, he wrote in vernacular so more people could reach this knowledge. Because when you write in Latin, not everyone knew Latin. This isn't like ancient Roman times where most people spoke and wrote in Latin. He is writing in the vernacular so that normal people in Italy can understand. And he's writing in Latin so the higher end people can also understand, and preserving this pure language that is Latin. So he kind of starts this whole movement focusing on virtues of what it meant to be a human being. So Dante's Divine Comedy from 1264, he lives in 1321. What this Divine Comedy is, a book, okay, written about 3 different places. It's all about the afterlife, but it's Paradiso, which is heaven, Purgatorio, which is purgatory, which means nowhere, right? It's like an empty void. Inferno, which is hell. He wrote about these 3 different, there's 7 layers to hell. And depending on the sins that you do will be the bottom layer is like the worst. It's meant for like the killers out there, the rapists. Next guy here is Baldassare Castiglione. He's the author of The Courtier. Now, The Courtier was a handbook, like a guidebook, to what it meant to be a Renaissance man. And this is interesting because when you are a Renaissance man, it means that you are a jack of all trades. Like you are skilled and you're not just good at one thing, you're good at many things. Like you can dance, you can sing, you're well educated, you can read, you can write, you can have political discussions, you can draw, amazing works of art. And so he outlined, you're charming, you're witty, you're very likable. This is what a Renaissance man is. Renaissance men were polite, charming, witty, strong, intelligent. They could speak Greek and Latin, and the list goes on and on. So Baldassare Castiglione writes The Courtier. It is a handbook on how to be a Renaissance man. Probably my favorite of the entire Renaissance is Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli. Now Machiavelli will write The Prince. Not what is morally right, but politically effective. That kind of sums up the book, and I've read this book. You have to know historically, context-wise. He's writing what's going on in the Italian city-states and how people are so corrupt and how leaders are staying in power. And the end justifies the mean. And you obviously need to write down Machiavelli. He wrote The Prince and what The Prince is about. So he writes, if you want to keep your position, you don't do necessarily what is morally right. Meaning you don't always do the correct thing, the admirable thing. You might have to do some dirty political tricks, or you might have to eliminate people in order to keep power. It may not be right, but it will keep you in power. And he writes this whole book, and some people see it as a pessimistic view. They banned the book. They banned it because it was seen as so radical. But many politicians, if you're getting into political science in any regard, you'll read The Prince. You should read The Prince. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're trying to do these nasty and evil tricks. It's just kind of enlightening you. And they use this term too. And they say a Machiavellian approach, and that kind of means that you're doing whatever it takes in order to finish the job, in order to keep power. But let's talk about some of the artists here. And there's a new style of art which you want to write down. Perspective art. Okay, gaining your perspective. You focus, and you probably learned this in art class, there's a vanishing point. So you pick where the vanishing point is. And if you look where the arrow is, you draw things smaller. And as you move toward the image, towards the bottom of the image gets larger because you're drawing it bigger. You're making it big. So it looks like there's more depth into your 2D surface. It's like a 3D image in a 2D plane. But it does this by using the vanishing point. It is a technique used to represent 3-dimensional objects on a 2-dimensional surface. A piece of paper or canvas in a way that looks natural and realistic. So this is just an outline view of it, of a city. Obviously these aren't cities during the Renaissance. That would be unrealistic. But you can see vanishing points here, drawing the images on a certain point. And as you go from that point, the images you draw them bigger to show depth, to show 3D dimensions on a 2D surface. The vanishing point would kind of be in the middle there. We'll talk about the School of Athens here. Finding that small point and drawing bigger as you kind of come near the image. It looks like that. But let's talk about some artists here. First one is Leonardo da Vinci, which you definitely need to write down because most of what the Renaissance is, it's, hey, this person did this, and this is their achievement. Leonardo da Vinci, not to be confused with Leonardo DiCaprio. Those are two different people, so please do not confuse those two. 1452 to 1519, and yes, you do see Leonardo the turtle. The turtles were modeled after these Renaissance painters, not the other way around. Michelangelo da Vinci did not say, hey, I'm going to be named after Leonardo the turtle, the ninja, teenage mutant ninja turtle. So, some things that Leonardo is known for. He's a painter and a sculptor, he's an inventor, and he's a scientist. Again, he's the epitome of what it means to be a Renaissance man. You want to write down that he draws the Mona Lisa, which is located in the Louvre in France, Paris, France to be specific. It is probably one of the most recognizable pieces of art in the world. You know, that kind of very small smirk, and we don't know exactly who he was drawing. We have theories. We have theories that it could be maybe his wife, his girlfriend, his mother, himself in a woman form, or just some random person. You know, it's really tough to say. And you can kind of see the details in the background. You can see a bridge on the right-hand side there if you're looking at it, a little curvy road on the left-hand side. But this type of artwork was just not, to this level of detail, was not seen. Then the level of colors was not seen. It's just not capable of doing this until the Renaissance. They're just nowhere even close to this. Like, they're just on a completely different playing field. It'd be like LeBron James came and played basketball against, like, middle schoolers. So Da Vinci also paints another famous mural. This is called The Last Supper, and I'm sure you've seen this painting. Now, when I say mural, I mean it's painted onto a wall, onto plaster. And this one is in Milan, Italy. In Milan, Italy. It's definitely more faded than this, but this was another very interesting depiction here. This is the Vitruvian Man, and he did this doing the correct dimensions of when you draw on a person. But it wasn't just that. He was an inventor too, and he would do whole blueprints of flying machines, helicopters, and winged vehicles, and complex mechanisms that just were not. No one thought of this. This is like beyond. This is so completely different than anything. A lot of his stuff, he was working for the Medicis, and a lot of it was, well, draw me some stuff, but I also want you to invent stuff like the tank, or these flying machines or killing machines. And Da Vinci is not all about that. He eventually quit because he just didn't want to be a part of that. He didn't want to make stuff that would kill people. But he also was known for digging up dead bodies and examining them. And look at, okay, how do these muscles work? Okay, how does these circulatory system work? How do these bones, how's everything? And he draws it in such detail and maps it out. Right? Giant crossbow, again, whatever he's basically told to do, he's doing, but then he'll eventually stop. The next Renaissance painter here is Michelangelo Buonarroti. Michelangelo Buonarroti. From 1475 to 1564. Paints the Sistine Chapel by himself over a number of years. And the reason that this is so impressive, and I've been to this one, this is in the Vatican. This is like the last thing that you see in Vatican City inside of Rome. And you have all these depictions of religious figures and so forth, all on the ceiling or on the walls, and you can't take pictures here. People still try to sneak pictures, which I think is so wrong, because it ruins the image. If everyone's flashing, that light will consistently burn away the image and ruin the images over time. So they try to make sure no cameras are allowed. They kick you out if you're taking pictures, even if there's no flash. They just say no pictures. And first of all, you're in there for. You can be there as long as you really want to be, but 5-10 minutes and just take it all in. It's really quite inspiring. He also sculpted. He was a better sculptor than he was a painter. He sculpted the statue of David. The David that I'm talking about is David and Goliath. Now, what's impressive about this one is that it was never meant to be inside. It was outside for a long time and meant to be seen from far away, not necessarily as close as these people are. So you can see the detail in his hand. His hand is very detailed. You can see the veins in it. You can see like the cracks in the hand and knuckles and so forth. But he's meant to show as a strong, powerful figure. And what he's holding over his backside, if you walk around, because this is in Florence, Italy, the backside of it, he's holding his slingshot, because David and Goliath, he throws the rock, hits Goliath in the head, and kills him instantly. But this thing is just insanely detailed, and sculpting's pretty difficult. That's Michelangelo. Another one here is Raphael Sanzio. From 1483 to 1520. This is all AD. And Raphael, yes, that is actually a man. I know a lot of people think, oh, that's a girl. Nope, it is a man. School of Athens is what he draws. A huge mural. The School of Athens is this giant mural that's it's inside the Vatican, and it's, as you take this long tour, you just see, a lot of Renaissance art, a lot of history from Greece, and so when you're in Vatican, this Vatican City, in the museum, they have this giant museum there. Some crazy stuff that's in there, some really cool stuff. But bottom left-hand corner, you know what that is? That's a door. That is a door. So you walk in, and you don't even notice it at first, because when you walk in from that angle, you look straight at another image on the other side. And then you take a left, and you look, and boom, there it is. And that caught me off guard, because I thought the School of Athens was a lot smaller. I didn't really understand that it was a mural at first. Before I actually really knew it, I thought it was just a giant painting. But it was a legit mural that's inside the Vatican City. And the reason they call this the School of Athens is because, boom, here it is. Alexander the Great, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Ptolemy, Pythagoras, all of these, Euclid, there we go, here's Euclid, all right, all of these different historically great Greeks, all right, Pythagoras, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, Euclidean geometry, Ptolemy, science, you can see him holding the globe there, with astronomy, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, all philosophers, and obviously Alexander the Great. And you can see one other particular person here, Raphael Sanzio himself. He's the guy in the white. So if you look at Pythagoras, where the arrow is, look straight up, and there he is, in white, in long black hair. There's Raphael. He has a cameo in this. He would depict himself sometimes in images like this, because this was typical of a Greek, especially a good Renaissance painter, was that they would incorporate Greek and Roman figures inside with their own. They saw themselves, since they're modeling themselves after Greco-Romans, they're going to include themselves into this, because they felt a part of the Greco-Roman style, right? Donatello from 1386 to 1466. Donatello would draw things, a lot of sculptures of Madonna, right? Not that Madonna. A lot of these are in different styles of bronze metal. Like, that's a huge figure there on a horse, but it's a bronze. Making things out of bronze was not done since the Greeks, and they couldn't really do it because they didn't know how. Probably what he's most famous for is the bronze David, and it would look something like this, much smaller, but it's made out of bronze, and bronze is incredibly tough to manipulate. It's not like you don't put it into a 3D printer and then you're good to go. Like, this takes an enormous amount of skill. There's Donatello. That's what basically he's known for, the bronze sculptures, and specifically the bronze David. Let's talk about the Northern Renaissance. So those are, writers, and those are sculptors and artists in the Italian Renaissance. It's all based out of Florence for the most part. But the epicenter here, you go north. Northern Renaissance is what you would want to write. The first area, the epicenter, is Flanders. This region is present-day Belgium. This is the center of the Northern Renaissance, Flanders. That's why I had you guys do the maps on Flanders. The first guy, he is an Englishman, Sir Thomas More, from 1478 to 1535. He will write about utopia. Utopia from 1516, The Perfect Society. Very interesting, because he writes about, basically it's a very socialist society. Everyone on this island, that it's make-believe island that he kind of makes up that no one can find, is they have all the resources that they need. Everyone participates, equally. There's no, gold is seen as, they don't wear gold. Everyone kind of wears the same thing. They share meals together. Everything is meant for each other. There's not like, oh, there's a really, really rich person, there's a really, really poor person. Everyone's the same. There are administrative rules, but that's only if you show a talent in school early on that they put you on a path to have an administrative role, but there are very few of those. And they don't have like major authority. And they would trade with off. This is all made up. So, but this is what he describes in the book. But if there ever were a perfect society, this is what it would be. I'm sure you've heard of Zootopia, like the perfect animal society. This is the perfect human society. So this is what he envisioned. He copied a lot of what he thought, Sir Thomas More, off of Plato's Republic. Right, how you should specifically govern. It was interesting too, because the one that really stuck out to me is in the book he says that a outsider comes in to kind of view the island, and this outsider wants to impress these utopians, and he's wearing all this gold and expensive clothing, and he's trying to impress them, and they're like, why are you wearing slaves' clothing? Because what they do is to minimize the value of gold on their island. If you do crimes, they will put you in gold chains. Basically, you're not like steel. They're gonna put them in gold, and you don't wear them for decoration or metallic adornment. You do it because that's what slaves would do. It's to minimize what gold is, because gold kind of makes us that gold fever, and you kind of become savage animals when you're looking for. If it boils down to it, it's a metal. It's a metal from space. And slowly this guy starts to like take his metal off, his rings and his crown and his necklace and all these gold things, and then he starts more looking like a utopian, and it's just probably a simple basic tunic. It's very interesting. You have plenty of time now. I would go read it. Another individual here is Desiderius Erasmus. Desiderius Erasmus from 1436 to 1506. And what Desiderius Erasmus does is he writes what's known as the Praise of Folly. A folly is like a blunder, a mess up, a goof. This will poke fun at the clergy. This will poke fun at scholars and merchants. He was from Flanders, which is the center of the Renaissance. And this is a time where this is like bringing back satire. So with the Greeks specifically, they were great at satire, making fun of political things or things in your everyday lives that was taboo to make fun of. And the church did not like this, not one bit. But he just basically said, pointing out like, no, this is ridiculous. It's so ridiculous, it's laughable. And that's kind of what a satire is, making fun of sometimes serious situations, but it's to point out the flaws in that serious situation, and typically it's done in politics. And he did this. So this was not, you didn't do this back then, so this is like very taboo, but it starts this, hey, yeah, I can say what I want. Another person we're going to talk about here is William Shakespeare. I'm sure you've heard of him before. This is not somebody new to you. He's an English playwright from 1564 to 1616. So Shakespeare, an English playwright, you want to write this down, obviously, wrote about the human condition in both tragedies and comedies. Again, looking back to the Greeks, right? The Greeks start the tragedies, they start the comedy. But then he also plays a lot of Roman rules in this. He takes a lot from Rome. Some of what's going on in his current day, but, things like Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. If you don't know Romeo and Juliet, where he gets the story is from Cleopatra and Mark Antony. If you remember, think about how Romeo and Juliet die, and then think about how Mark Antony and Cleopatra die. One thinking the other is dead, but not really, and then committing themselves, they can't live a life without each other, so the one commits suicide. Well, it's the same thing here. Hamlet, another one. All right, these are all famous Shakespearean works. Johannes Gutenberg from 1398 to 1468. And Gutenberg will invent the printing press, which you obviously need to write down. He used movable type. The Bible became an instant bestseller. It's still the bestseller in the world. So he uses this, because before, if you wanted to make another copy of a book, you had to have a monk handwrite it out, and it would take months and months to make one copy. You know, you could make hundreds and hundreds of copies in a quarter of the time. Not, you know, like it was just insane. Like, you know, if it took 6 months to make one book, we'll say, 1,000-page book, we'll say, it would take the printing press 1 month to make 500 or 1,000 copies, right? It was just astronomically better to do it. But yeah, movable type. They had it in China. It's not like they didn't have movable type, but the problem was there were so many characters. It was just still painstakingly long. But the fact that the English or these other languages, these Romance languages, had much less letters, it was much easier to do. That's what the printing press would look like, though. Renaissance versus medieval art. So let's just take a look and see the differences here. All right. So some of the Renaissance art here is just so much better than medieval art. Medieval art this is what you would see from medieval art. You know, early Middle Ages, not very realistic, you know, huge eyes, not proportional. Alrighty, that has been episode 26 of Shankism, the Renaissance, Italian, and Northern.
I can feel the fire come alive, so calm before the storm, so dark before the dawn. Oh, I can see the fire in your eyes, in your eyes. Oh, I can see the fire in your eyes, in your eyes. Oh, I can see the fire in your eyes. Once you felt that burning flame, you're chasing stars alive. What was broken's left behind, watch it crumble in the light. Nothing can stop you now. See the colors of the sky slowly turn from black and white, rising hope bright as gold. And now there's nothing left to lose, so we're breaking all the rules, and they don't know what we know. 'Cause I can hear the thunder from afar, a lightning in the dark.